Congratulations on the new office, sir.
But I'm not happy.
Not happy? Why aren't you happy?
I feel that this vault contained 1,000,000 dinars.
1,000,000 dinars. Where did 1,000,000 dinars come from?
They were here, I'm sure.
Then how did they disappear?
Riyadh stole them.
Riyadh. Riyadh is a good employee. Is there any evidence against him?
As soon as I felt something was wrong, I automatically locked the company doors. Then, I called Riyadh in here and searched him. I found a piastre in his shirt pocket, and this is its picture.
A piastre, sir? This is clearly a coffee stain, not a piastre.
Look, I searched his pants pocket and found a shilling. I assure you it's Riyadh and no one else.
A shilling? There are many possible explanations. Maybe it was there before. Why did you assume it was stolen?
You just want to defend him, but I am sure he did it. I am not accusing him without evidence. I searched the other pocket and found another 10 piastres in it. I searched him thoroughly.
What shilling and what 10 piastres, sir? We're talking about 1,000,000 dinars. Where did they all disappear?
In the future, more will be discovered. Maybe Riyadh swallowed the 1,000,000 dinars.
With the same logic, the evolution myth disciples claim that a fossil here or there belongs to transitional forms, which proves their evolution through random mutations and blind natural selection. They say, the theory of evolution necessitates the existence of transitional fossils, i.e., intermediate forms between different species, and scientists have actually discovered such transitional fossils. Then they hypothesize about their age, as in this clip with Richard Dawkins.
People often say, where are the intermediate fossils? Show us your intermediate fossils. There are plenty of intermediate fossils, and one of the best examples is whale.
Let's set aside the fabrications and misinterpretations concerning these fossils, listed in the comments. Let us also skip the fact that what he refers to are not fossils, as he claims, but imaginations woven around fossil fragments. More importantly, these people evade the necessary consequence of the myth. The myth doesn't require some transitional forms or an occasional intermediary link. It requires innumerable forms, quantity, not just quality. Let us explain. Many Darwinians affirm that mankind evolved from fish. You'll find, on their websites, a diagram such as this showing the evolution of fish into humans. Let's take two organisms from this purported evolutionary lineage, a mouse-like organism evolving into a monkey-like organism. What is required for such an evolution to take place? In the episode, Address Them as Children, we showed the foolishness of the idea that random mutations can produce a small change in an organism, such as the elongation of a giraffe's neck, especially when we take into consideration the complex changes needed in the internal body systems and the required genetic modifications. It is not a silly game of reshaping Play-Doh as the myth disciples make it seem. In this episode, we'll follow the liar right to his door and assume that it is as simple as reshaping Play-Doh. What does this Play-Doh transformation require? Each point on the arrow connecting these two animals represents a transitional form. The points are many because they represent small, slow, gradual changes, according to the myth disciples. Each millimeter on the line represents a step in the slow and gradual elongation of the mouse's limbs and its tail, and the subtle changes of its head dimensions. Over hundreds of millions of years and passing through countless transitional forms, the mouse turns into a monkey. Therefore, the mouse and the monkey must, supposedly, be submerged in a sea of transitional forms. Where are these countless transitional forms? Nowhere to be found on the face of the earth. Fine, let's overlook that and search beneath the ground. Where are these innumerable forms in the fossil record? The reality of the fossil record is that it has a very large number of fossils, but for the distinct organisms living today, looking the same. There are only a few ambiguous fossils which the myth disciples cling to, claiming that they are transitional forms. Therefore, representing a fossil here or there as an intermediate form is more absurd than considering a piastre and a shilling evidence for 1,000,000 dinar theft. How about when true science falsifies these claims, one by one, as in the examples of the episode, for the sake of the myth? So the piastres and shillings were forgeries and fakes. Darwin realized this and stated that his myth necessitates countless numbers of transitional fossils. Countless, or in his own words, countless numbers, innumerable. He expressed annoyance at their absence but counted on the completion of the fossil record in the future. Just like the manager who counted on the possibility that Riyadh swallowed the million dinars. There are so many fossils of known organisms, but they contain nothing of what Darwin imagined, as they should be submerged in oceans of transitional organisms. Still, he relies on future discoveries to validate his myth. A century and a half after Darwin's hopes and dreams, with fossils of more than 100,000 species discovered, the absence of innumerable transitional forms is even more than it was in Darwin's day. As in this article, which somehow made its way to the New York Times. With that, we have shown you what we mean when we say that one of the methods the myth disciples use is evasion of the necessary consequences of their own myth. But wait a minute. There is a very important issue. Everything we said is about the transformation of one organism into another, according to a specific plan, i.e., we want to move from point A to point B. However, Darwin asserts in his book, The Origin of Species, that there is no plan of creation, and his followers confirm this. No plan of creation, no purpose, no design. They loathe these phrases. They have a phobia about them to the extent that they change the term adaptation to a made-up term exaptation, just like their fictional organisms, simply because adaptation implies intentionality, which they oppose, as discussed in the episode. Citrate-utilizing bacteria. What does no plan of creation mean? First, imagine we have a circle which we want to transform into a square using a specific plan. What does it take to transform it gradually? Each new shape you see represents a transitional phase that is slightly different from the previous one. The big shape in the center is an enlarged image of the stage reached at each point in time. Thus, the circle changes slowly, with corners appearing gradually. Then, these corners slowly become pointed. The circle's circumference progressively transforms into straight sides until ultimately we get a square. Now, imagine what would happen if the circle changed randomly without a plan or intention. What would happen then? Random shapes would pop up in every direction. Some of these shapes will become extinct by natural selection, while others would continue to change randomly in every direction. What about the square? What square? There was no intention to transform the circle into a square to begin with. Perhaps one day one of the random shapes that survives will turn into a square, but only after an unimaginable number of chaotic, purposeless shapes have formed, a percentage of which would be preserved in the fossil record. The required changes, previously mentioned, to turn a mouse into a monkey, are intentional changes within a plan like the intentional changes we made to turn the circle into a square. Since the myth disciples assume no plan, it is deceptive of them to draw a line from one organism to another to delude people that the only requirement is to find the transitional forms in between. Just like we did with the circle, which we planned to convert into a square. In fact, according to their myth, the organism is like a blind person asked to move. Move where? North, south, east, or west? Up in the air or down into the ground? Just move. Without any guidance, our blind friend moves in all directions. A group of mice transforms into various chaotic forms, some of which become extinct while others transform without guidance or a plan. And maybe one day, one turns into a monkey after countless messy, purposeless forms fill the earth, air, land, and sea. The myth fanatics say, no plan of creation. Yet, at the same time, their scenarios depend on the existence of such a plan. They draw a line between two organisms, while their randomness is more like a nuclear fission than a straight line. Therefore, dear viewers, the terms used by the myth disciples, such as intermediate organisms and transitional forms, are misleading, because intermediate implies a middle point between two definite points and transitional implies a step on the way to a specific goal, whereas the myth actually requires countless numbers of random forms of organisms, such as mice, to change without any guidance, in all directions before they transform by chance, in the manner of Play-Doh, to the hypothetical evolved form. All this complexity involves just 2 species of the more than 8 million estimated species which Darwin believed came from a common ancestor. Dear viewers, let's review the obscurity of the myth and the deceptions of the pseudoscience zealots that we discussed in the previous and today's episode. Treating organisms as Play-Doh or Photoshop images, disregarding the organism's internal systems and genetic code, overlooking the absence of signs for random chaotic changes in the organisms on Earth, which drove them, unjustifiably, from above ground to underground, to the fossils, drawing transformation lines for the evolution of organisms, while they deny a plan of creation. Considering the piaster and the shilling, that is the fossils, as evidence for the theft of 1 million dinars. Ignoring the huge number of fossils of distinct organisms known and existing to this day, and, on the other hand, the absence of immeasurably larger numbers of transitional fossils which their myth requires. The crowning touch is that their piasters and shillings, i.e. the fossils they cling to, are counterfeit or misinterpreted. When you realize this, dear viewers, you will burst out laughing when you hear one of them saying, "The discovery of this and that transitional fossil proves the evolution of reptiles into birds. Case closed." What a comedy of ignorance or deliberate omission. You'll also laugh as they celebrate the discovery of any fossil and ignore the nonsense they weave around it. Once you understand this, you'll realize the depth of their compounded ignorance and deception. You'll understand the meaning of Allah Almighty's words, that is translated as darkness upon darkness. If one stretches out their hand, they can hardly see it. And whoever Allah does not bless with light will have no light. Our episode was about evading the necessary consequences of the myth. A piece of advice. Whenever anyone proposes an idea to you, examine the idea's necessary consequences. What are its inevitable results? Before this person spins a misleading web and confuses you with the details. Let's see how Richard spun his misleading web, then led us down a rabbit hole.
People often say, where are the intermediate fossils? Show us your intermediate fossils. There are plenty of intermediate fossils, and one of the best examples is whales.
Then he loses us in the details, terminology, and the millions of years which must have passed.
The modern whales are up there. Here's a series of fossils. Back in time, Dorodon about 36 million years ago, Rhodocetus about 47.5 million years, Pachycetus about 48.5 million years.
Now, let us slow down the video to catch him in the act, to pinpoint the moment of deception.
People often say, where are the intermediate fossils? Show us your intermediate fossils. There are plenty of intermediate fossils, and one of the best examples is whales.
Wait, Richard, before you start telling us about your fake piasters, fossils, tell us who stole the 1 million dinars. Thus far, we've discussed mixing myth with facts, dazzling you into letting them do the thinking for you, addressing people as children, evading the necessary consequences of the myth. Peace be upon you.